Raymond's voice echoed through the hallway as I walked past the executive conference room. Innovation comes from youth, he was saying, full-chested and performative, like he was pitching a TED talk to a room full of yes men. I didn't stop walking. I'd heard it all before. Heard it at our wedding, actually, when he toasted my husband for choosing well and then thanked me for keeping the catering under budget. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of 14-hour days, weekend logins, and duct taping this family-owned circus of a company together with vendor relationships and pure caffeine. And it wasn't even my family. Not really. I was just the daughter-in-law, which in Raymond's kingdom meant unpaid intern with a better wardrobe. Want the truth? Nepotism didn't help me. It buried me. Raymond liked the optics of keeping me on the ground level so he could play noble king, doling out opportunities to outsiders while keeping his own house in check. He called it fairness. I called it humiliation with a 401k. I built the logistics pipeline, negotiated supplier exclusivity with firms that hadn't returned Raymond's calls in a decade, turned a department that used to run on Google Sheets and crossed fingers into a functional machine with 22% profit growth year over year. No one clapped. Hell, I think half of them still thought my name was Lisa. The only time I ever saw my name mentioned in an internal memo, it was under travel policy enforcement, because I'd canceled a VP's trip to Napa when he tried to expense a couple's massage. That same VP once asked me if I was the receptionist's assistant. I run 5 departments, Greg. But sure, I'll fetch your latte if it helps you sleep at night. Oh, and let's not forget the big pitch I landed last quarter. 48 pages of strategy, 7 months of setup calls, and a custom dashboard rollout. The client sent Raymond a gift basket addressed to me. He ate the chocolates and forwarded me a blurry photo of the card with a thumbs-up emoji. Still, I stayed, because part of me believed maybe, hard work would outshine bloodlines, that maybe being better would eventually matter more than being born into the right dinner conversations. Stupid, I know. And if you've ever been in a job where you know you're the backbone, but no one else seems to notice until you slip a disc, you'll understand why I started printing receipts. Not just literal invoices. Receipts, emails, contracts, renewal clauses, access logs. I started bookmarking everything with the paranoid grace of a woman who's seen too many boys named Chad get promoted for remembering to wear shoes to a Zoom call. That's how I ended up staring at one particular clause I'd authored last fiscal year, buried in a renewal packet for a key supplier. A few lines of legalese I'd negotiated directly, giving me, personally, exclusive liaison status for vendor management through Q4. I remember the lawyer blinking at me when I insisted it go in. Why? She asked. Isn't that unusual? I just smiled and said, sometimes you don't know you're being erased until they need your handwriting. Oh, and while you're here, before we get deeper into this mess, if stories like this hit a little too close to your cubicle, go ahead and tap that subscribe button and hit like. It's the cheapest therapy you'll ever get, and it actually does help the team keep telling these stories. All right, let's keep going. So there I was, 3 years in, 1 foot always ready to pivot, and still hoping Raymond might just once say, nice job. What I got instead? An all-hands meeting with catered bagels and a smiling intern named Cole. But we'll get there. First, let me tell you about the golf lunch, because that's where the fuse was lit. Raymond had been extra chipper that week, kept whistling some Sinatra song off-key and strolling around the office like Santa Claus with a midlife crisis. My husband, bless his sweet, oblivious heart, mentioned over dinner that Dad had met up with his old golf buddy Mitch and Mitch's son, who just got a marketing degree and might be interning. Interning? I repeated. Yeah, just for a quarter maybe. Dad said he seems sharp, might have potential. Cool, I said. Cut my steak like it had personally offended me. A week later, Cole showed up. Teeth too white, handshake too firm, dress shoes like he borrowed them from a mannequin. Everyone fell over themselves welcoming him. Raymond gave him a tour personally. I'd been there 3 years and still didn't have a parking spot. Cole's desk was 2 down from mine. He had dual monitors and a window seat. I was still working off the laptop I'd paid for myself. On day 3, he asked me how to access the project drive. I'll ask IT to onboard you, I said with a smile. And just a heads up, you'll want to read through the supplier exclusivity clauses, especially the one on North Axis. It's trickier than it looks, he blinked. North Axis? I tapped my temple. Vendor management lives up here. What I didn't say, you'll never find it unless you know where I buried the bones, and I was just getting started. 2 weeks after Cole's miraculous descent from Golf Olympus into our open plan purgatory, the buzz began. It started like all dangerous ideas do, overheard whispers in the copy room, and an accidental reply all from the CFO's assistant. A new initiative. Big, like double our revenue big. Something to do with streamlining logistics for high-volume clients using a proprietary system I'd actually been sketching out in my spare time for months. You know, in between fixing invoices, putting out supplier fires, and finding out someone named Travis had tried to expense a $400 steak dinner as team bonding. But this was different. It wasn't just another quarterly adjustment or budget reshuffle. This was the project. The kind you could staple to your resume and let it scream for you in bold font. I built this. naturally. I'd been laying the groundwork for this beast since before Cole even knew how to send a calendar invite. My team had already prototyped a logistics module that cut lead times by 18%. We were ready, hell. We were the only department actually running under budget. Then one night, as I was microwaving leftovers and trying to decide if Pinot Grigio counted as self-care, my husband walked in, grinning like he'd just solved the Middle East peace talks. "Dad's talking about that logistics expansion," he said, shoveling lasagna into his mouth. He's super impressed, told me you've basically built the whole foundation. Said he'll probably give it to you. I didn't reply. Just sipped my wine and smiled like a woman who's heard this bedtime story before and already knows how it ends. Spoiler, the princess doesn't get the castle. She gets passed over for the squire who once fixed the drawbridge gate and called it innovation. "Don't get that look," my husband said. "He means it, sure," I murmured. Right after he stops calling my department the little engine that could. And yet I couldn't help it. Somewhere in the cobwebbed attic of my brain, hope blinked on like a stupid candle. What if this time merit won? What if all the late nights, the spreadsheet autopsies, the calm I'd faked in front of clients while simultaneously Googling how to fix corrupted ZIP files, what if it was finally going to pay off? The next morning, I showed up early, beat the janitor, cleaned up my inbox like I was prepping for Judgment Day, forwarded some reports to Raymond with clean charts and optimized bullet points. All killer, no filler. His reply? Thumbs up, I told myself that was good, until I saw him later that day at the cafe across the street, sharing a salmon sandwich with Mitch from golf. And Mitch's son, Cole, grinning like he'd just been knighted with a bagel knife. They didn't see me. I watched from the sidewalk, iced coffee sweating in my hand, pretending I wasn't plotting 3 different exit strategies and a 4th where I'd just fake a seizure and escape through the ceiling tiles. Cole was nodding along while Raymond gestured with his hands like he was explaining some great visionary plan. My plan, no doubt, while Cole nodded like he wasn't still Googling what a vendor SLA was. Back at the office, Cole had a sticky note on his monitor that said, "Call North Axis Guy Askry, clause." I stared at it for a full 10 seconds before slipping into the bathroom to scream silently into a paper towel. Still, no one had said anything official, so I kept going, kept pushing the timeline forward, scheduled a few team meetings, drafted a new supplier engagement model and titled it Phase 1 Fast Track. I even saved a copy in a private folder labeled in case ITChem screwed. That night, Raymond sent out a company-wide email. Subject, exciting expansion ahead. The body was corporate word salad, synergies, client engagement optimization, strategic partnerships. But I read between the lines. There was a big project coming, and everyone knew I'd built the bones of it. My team started buzzing, slapping my back, saying things like, "This is your baby and can't wait to see you in charge of this one." I smiled, nodded, laughed along. But that candle, the one in the attic, it flickered. Because I'd seen Raymond play this game before. And I'd seen enough interns with nice smiles and famous fathers get handed the keys to empires they didn't build. Still, I didn't blow the whistle yet. I needed to see if he'd really do it. Spoiler, he did. And with confetti, they brought in croissants. That's how I knew it was bad. Raymond only sprang for catering when he wanted to soften a blow or sweeten a betrayal. The last time there were pastries in the conference room, half the QA team got absorbed into marketing, and their manager found out via calendar invite. So when I walked in and saw the glossy trays of carbs and fruit skewers, I nearly turned around. But I didn't, because I had a front row seat to whatever performance was about to unfold. And something told me it was going to be a classic. We all filed in. Department heads, project leads, interns, yes, plural, because apparently fresh blood was the new KPI. I took my usual seat on the left side, halfway down the table. Not too close, not too far. Strategic invisibility honed over 3 years. Raymond came in last, always did, like a sitcom character entering after the laugh track. Except this time he had Cole with him. Cole, in a blazer that still had the brand tag stitched to the sleeve, carrying a laptop like it might bite him. I clocked the jitter in his left leg, the over-applied cologne, the way he mouthed the words as Raymond launched into his opening monologue. Team, Raymond began. With that condescending sincerity he reserved for interns and me, as you all know, we're embarking on an exciting new phase of growth. I already hated it. He clicked a button. The first slide popped up, Project Elevate, Strategic Future. It was in Comic Sans. I stared at it, blinked. Surely this was a joke. We've been watching the trends, analyzing the metrics, he said, completely ignoring the 5-month analytics report I'd compiled that he'd signed off on. We've realized we need to approach this initiative with fresh eyes. He paused for effect. And that's why I'm thrilled to announce that Cole will be leading Project Elevate as our interim strategic innovation lead. Silence. You know that kind of silence that doesn't even feel like silence? It's a vacuum. A noise-sucking, logic-devouring void. A pit in the room where everyone's common sense goes to die. It was like someone had slapped the mute button on reality. Few people shifted uncomfortably. One guy coughed, but it sounded like what the F and then turned into a throat clear. Even the air vents seemed confused. Raymond beamed. Cole stood up awkwardly. Yeah, really honored. Can't wait to learn. I mean lead. I smiled and I clapped. Just 3 quiet, polite claps. Like a school teacher applauding a 3rd grader for not eating glue. Everyone else followed, unsure whether to celebrate or check for hidden cameras. I didn't say a word. Raymond never even looked at me. My name wasn't mentioned. Not even a courtesy nod. Not a single acknowledgement that I had built every damn foundation this project stood on. That I had written the vendor frameworks, organized the client transition plans, and streamlined the entire backend. Nope. All that mattered now was Cole, intern with a LinkedIn profile that listed team player under skills and had a quote from the Wolf of Wall Street in his About section. After the meeting, I didn't storm out. I didn't cry in the bathroom. I just drifted, walked back to my desk, opened my inbox, flagged a few messages, then went to the supply closet to retrieve a new notebook, because if the game was changing, I needed a new playbook. Cole found me 2 hours later, nervous, sweaty, holding a printed copy of a supplier agreement I'd authored 6 months ago. Hey, Alinda, he said, tapping the paper. Do you have the original doc for this? The North Axis exclusivity thing? I don't totally get the renewal language. I looked at him for a long beat, long enough for him to start twitching. Then I smiled like a woman staring into the void and finally seeing shapes. That's not my job anymore, I said. And I walked away, because it wasn't. Not for long. Raymond's office always smelled like old money and bad decisions. Mahogany desk. Leather chair that probably cost more than my first car. A framed golf photo of him shaking hands with some sweaty executive who once tried to pitch a multi-level coffee subscription. The man had taste, sure, if you consider divorce attorney chic a design style. I knocked once and stepped in without waiting. He was on the phone, pretending to sound busy, flipping through a file of printouts like they meant anything. I stood there, smiling, holding the envelope. He waved me in with one finger, still talking. Yeah, we'll circle back on the onboarding doc. Let's touch base next week. Cole will quarterback the vendor handoff. Yep, fresh perspective. Love it, quarterback, Jesus. He hung up and finally looked up at me, the mask slipping into his version of paternal warmth. Linda, big day, huh? Exciting times. I hope you're ready to support Cole as we ramp up. Support Cole, like I was his unpaid emotional doula. Like I hadn't already built the thing Cole was about to crash into a wall. I smiled. I just wanted to thank you, I said, calm as a cucumber in a freezer. He blinked. Oh, for the opportunity, for the experience, for showing me exactly where I stand. And I laid the envelope gently on the desk in front of him. White. Clean, crisp, no drama. His face did a thing, eyes narrowed, lips parted like he couldn't quite process the fact that someone dared to reject him. He opened the flap and pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. One sentence. I, Linda Farrow, resign effective 2 weeks from today. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, like a fish discovering existential dread. You're joking, right? No, I said, same polite tone I used to explain to interns how Outlook folders worked. I'll wrap up cleanly, no hard feelings. He leaned back, looking suddenly smaller in that oversized throne of his. Is this because of the project? I tilted my head. You made your decision, I'm making mine. He blinked again. Come on, Linda, let's be adults. You're taking this personally. You made it personal the second you decided I was more useful and visible. He had nothing. Just stared at the paper like it might start dancing and tell him how to fix it. I turned to leave. Paused at the door. Oh, I'll transfer access to the necessary files. Some may take time. Legal clearance and all. He squinted. Legal clearance? I smiled wider. Some of our contracts are delicate. You'll want to get legal involved, especially on the exclusivity renewals. I left before he could ask what I meant. Before he could see the blind copy I'd just sent from my phone to legal@NorthAxisPartners.com. With the subject line, per Clause 9C, Notice of Contractual Liaison Departure. I walked back to my desk, packed slowly. No big announcement, no farewell email, just quiet, methodical closure. Each folder archived, each handoff note meticulously drafted. Each file saved to the correct directory, except for a few I left intentionally blank, placeholders with names like Q4 Timeline Fina L Final V9, just to see who'd notice. By 3 p.m., the news had leaked. By 5, people were whispering in the break room. By 6, Cole tried to get into the supplier dashboard and got hit with a restricted access pop-up. That night, over takeout, my husband said, "So, you really quit?" I nodded. Yep, he chewed slowly. Wow, I mean, Dad's gonna freak. He already did. Are you okay? I thought about it. I'd spent 3 years grinding myself into something unrecognizable, waiting for someone to validate my worth. I'd been quiet, polite, strategic, a good soldier, and now I felt free. I think I am, I said. The next morning, I ordered business cards for my LLC, and I sent one more email to myself. Subject, in case they come crawling. Attachment, a folder labeled vendor leverage, read first, just in case, 2 weeks. That's how long it took before the gears started grinding. Not a dramatic crash, not a fireworks finale, just the slow, painful creak of a machine realizing one of its most essential screws was gone. It started with a Slack message. Not to me, of course. I wasn't there anymore, but an old coworker forwarded the screenshot. Hey, anyone got the North Axis contact? We're hitting a wall on procurement. That wall? Me. See, when I'd negotiated the North Axis agreement, I'd insisted on a single point of liaison for all component fulfillment, not just because I liked control, though let's be honest, I do, but because I knew their VP of Ops, Carmen, hated fragmented communication. One voice, one thread, that was the deal. And in Clause 7.2, buried between boilerplate indemnity jargon and force majeure language, it stated clearly, Authorized Liaison, L. Faro. Transfer of liaison role requires 30-day notice and written approval from North Axis Legal. Guess who didn't get that memo? Cole. The order got kicked back. No parts shipped. No updates. Just a pleasant professional per contract terms. We cannot process requests from unauthorized personnel from Carmen's assistant. Cue panic. Cole apparently started calling everyone he could find on LinkedIn who had vendor in their job title. No one responded. The week after that, another vendor, Fulcrum Dynamics, flagged a delivery clause. Turns out their contract included a timeline penalty waiver that only applied while I was overseeing implementation. Without me, fees kicked back in. Hard. Suddenly, the numbers stopped making sense. Budgets ballooned. Timelines slipped. The magic project with Comic Sans Dreams started bleeding money before it even launched. I didn't gloat, not out loud. But when I got a LinkedIn message from my old assistant that read, "Do you take the whole house of cards with you or just the top floor?" I did allow myself one smug sip of overpriced oat milk latte, detached curiosity. That's what I felt, like watching a reality show where you already know who's going to cheat on whom, you just don't know when or how messy. Then came the call, not to me again, but someone leaked the Zoom transcript. A vendor check-in, standard stuff. Only Cole was leading the call, and the client rep asked about the licensing handover for the IP architecture in Phase 2. Cole, bless him, said, I don't think we actually own it. I think it's in the files Linda had, but we can figure it out later." You could hear the silence, a beat. Then the vendor calmly replied, "So you're saying the intellectual property you're building on isn't fully transferred?" Cole laughed. "Well, I mean, it's all in the system, I think, right?" Another beat. And someone left the call. That was the turning point. The moment the remaining illusion shattered, when everyone realized Cole wasn't just underqualified, he was overconfident and dangerously underinformed. My phone buzzed later that day. Unknown number. I didn't answer. Then it buzzed again, same number. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened. It was one of the junior PMs, whispering like she was in a confessional booth. "Hey, just wanted to say it's a mess over here. I know you're gone, but God, Linda, they're unraveling. Raymond's blaming the suppliers. Cole's blaming legal. Legal's blaming procurement. It's like musical chairs on fire. Thought you'd want to know." I smiled. Not a big one. Just enough to feel it in my cheekbones. I closed the voicemail and opened a document labeled Consulting Retainer Draft V3. Adjusted the rate, then leaned back in my chair and watched the metaphorical smoke rise from a company that never thought I mattered, until I was no longer there to clean up their mess. Raymond never called me. Not when my mother was in the hospital. Not when my team pulled an all-nighter to save $1 million contract he nearly tanked. Not even when I got married to his son, his only son, and became the daughter-in-law he weaponized at board meetings like some passive-aggressive trophy wife with access to spreadsheets. So when his name lit up my screen on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, I didn't answer. I let it ring while I poured a cup of tea. Not coffee, tea, because that's what you drink when you're no longer living in fight or flight. It rang again 20 minutes later, then once more. By the fourth attempt, I picked up with the same tone I used for sales reps offering a once-in-a-lifetime CRM migration tool. "Hi, Raymond." Linda, his voice was sugar dipped in motor oil. "How are you?" I let the silence do the heavy lifting. He cleared his throat. I've been meaning to reach out. Just wanted to check in, see how things are going." I looked around the co-working suite I'd rented just last week. Bright windows, quiet. Smelled like eucalyptus and printer ink. I knew home base, paid for 6 months in advance by North Axis as part of a vendor strategy engagement. Not that I was bragging. "Yet, I'm well," I said, smiling faintly at the glass wall that separated me from a design team workshopping a logo involving a goose and a lightning bolt. "That's great, really great. Listen, I won't waste your time." He always wasted my time. We've hit a few snags with Elevate. Minor stuff, of course, growing pains. But it made me think maybe we could bring you in, just temporarily. Help smooth a few things out, for the good of the company. There it was. The white flag folded neatly in a cashmere tone. "I'm consulting full-time now," I said lightly, of course. But we were thinking more like a short-term engagement, just to get us through this phase. I didn't laugh, but my tea almost did. "I'd consider it," I replied, "depending on the terms." A pause. "Well, I'm sure we can work something out. What kind of package are you thinking?" I opened a new tab, typed out a figure, tripled my old salary, added a clause for vendor protection advisement and a monthly retainer with a 90-day minimum. "I'll send you a proposal," I said. "It'll be clear." Another pause, a nervous laugh. "You've certainly found your voice, huh?" "I always had it, Raymond. You just talked over it." He chuckled, but it was hollow, like he was standing in a hallway that had just lost all its doors. "I'll look for the email." "You do that." We hung up. I stared at the phone for a moment, then turned back to my notes. I had 3 calls lined up that day, one with a logistics startup looking to poach Raymond's core fulfillment strategy, which I wrote, another with a former client looking to move their contract away from the company, and a third with Fulcrum Dynamics to finalize a consulting package they'd offered me the day after I walked out. People were noticing. People remembered. Not the fireworks or the handshakes, but the results. The emails answered at 2 a.m. The saved shipments, the polite but unrelenting follow-ups that turned maybe into yes. The intern, word was he had started forwarding all vendor requests to procurement with PLS advise in the subject line. He'd scheduled a brainstorming lunch with marketing to rebrand the confusion. His new nickname in the office was Captain Slide Deck. Raymond never mentioned Cole in the call. He didn't have to. Later that day, I emailed the retainer contract. Watched as the read receipt pinged less than 5 minutes after I hit send. He didn't reply right away. But the next morning, I got a wire transfer. And a single-line email, consider us retained. I printed it out, taped it to the wall above my desk in the co-working suite, and titled it, My Favorite Apology. Raymond always thought clients were loyal to the brand. That the logo on the letterhead was what kept deals alive, not the people behind the curtain making sure the wheels didn't fall off and the contracts didn't spontaneously combust at 11:59 p.m. on a holiday weekend. He was wrong. It started with an email forwarded to me from a friend still inside the company. Subject line, urgent account escalation. Hexler Group. Hexler was one of the company's whales. Multi-year engagement. High margin, demanding as hell. The kind of client that didn't blink at a 6-figure scope increase but would rage for a week if their quarterly dashboard loaded 5 seconds late. I'd managed them personally for 2.5 years. Their operations director once sent me a Christmas card with a bottle of whiskey and a handwritten note that said, "You're the reason this circus stays in town." Apparently, Hexler had requested a meeting with Raymond and the board to discuss the viability of continued engagement. Translation: they were preparing to walk. The leaked meeting minutes came a few days later, courtesy of another friend, bless her paranoia and working from home screen recorder. Raymond started the call by trying to charm them. "We know there've been a few bumps, but we're confident the new team is more than capable." Then Hexler's lead strategist cut him off. "With all due respect, your new team couldn't find a project timeline if you nailed it to their foreheads." Raymond laughed. Wrong move. They weren't joking. "We're terminating the current contract unless Linda Farrow is re-engaged. Effective immediately." Raymond stammered something about legal complications and transition planning. Hexler replied, "No need. We've already signed a direct contract with her firm. If your company wants to keep the relationship, you'll coordinate through her." The soundbite of the century. I played it 3 times on loop while eating leftover Thai food in my suite. Vindication doesn't always arrive with trumpets. Sometimes it shows up as a cold, clean memo from a billion-dollar client that simply says, "We'd prefer to work with her directly." Raymond tried to spin it. To the board, he called it strategic delegation. To the finance team, cost-splitting innovation. But everyone saw the numbers. Hexler accounted for nearly 18% of revenue last quarter. And now, that revenue flowed through my LLC. And they weren't the only ones sniffing around. 2 other mid-tier clients had reached out to me through back channels. Quiet lunches, casual hypotheticals. One even sent flowers to the co-working suite with a card that said, "In case you're still accepting miracles." I was. Every new inquiry felt like justice in deposit form. Raymond's mask started to crack. My inside source said the board had begun asking for weekly updates, real ones, not the fluffed PowerPoint fluff he liked to present with pastel gradients and stock photos of handshake silhouettes. The last board meeting ended with one of the more senior members allegedly saying, "You told us the intern could carry the torch. So far, all he's lit is our reputation." Cole had reportedly tried to deflect blame onto the legacy systems, which was adorable, since the system in question had my name on most of its logic trees. He'd scheduled a 2-day offsite to align vision, which I think involved whiteboards and a Spotify playlist titled Innovation Vibes. Meanwhile, I was too busy reviewing NDAs, navigating client migrations, and hiring an assistant. A real one this time, not the imaginary kind Raymond promised me every quarter before telling me budgets are tight, kiddo. What stung Raymond most, I suspect, wasn't the loss of control. It was the realization that his clients saw me before he ever did. His kingdom was built on the assumption that people stayed loyal to logos. I built mine on relationships, receipts, and the quiet knowledge that if you give everything to someone who refuses to see you, they'll eventually feel your absence like a hole in the floor. By the end of the week, my calendar was booked solid. By the end of the month, I'd made more than my last 3 quarters combined. By the time Raymond reached out again, this time via a carefully worded email CCing 2 board members, I already had a canned reply ready. As previously stated, all communications will go through my client portal. My team will be in touch regarding terms. I didn't even sign it best. Just Linda. The boardroom looked like someone had died. Maybe not a person, but definitely someone's illusion of competence. Emergency session. No quassos this time. Just tension so thick it curdled the air. Raymond sat at the head of the table, suit slightly askew, hair a shade too flat. The man had finally stopped trying to win the room with swagger. Across from him sat legal, their lead counsel flipping slowly through a red folder marked Exit Agreements Pharaoh, L. The only sound was the faint buzz of a dying fluorescent light overhead and the occasional tap of a pen on a leather portfolio. The CFO was already 2 shades past panic, whispering furiously to someone from compliance. The VP of Ops was pale, and Cole, bless him, sat 3 seats down from Raymond, silent, small, and suddenly very interested in the wood grain of the table. "Let's begin," the board chair finally said. Legal cleared her throat and looked up, deadpan. "After review of the exit documentation executed by Mr. Raymond, we've identified several critical oversights." Raymond leaned forward. It was a standard offboarding. I saw nothing unusual. She slid a copy of my signed exit paperwork across the table. "Section D, Clause 4B, she said. "Per this language, Miss Farrow retained rights to the IP framework she authored unless formally reassigned under board approval." A long silence. Raymond blinked. "That's not possible. I never would have you signed it," Legal said calmly. "Initialed and time-stamped. We've confirmed metadata." It looked like he'd swallowed a stapler. "She was just leaving. It was a courtesy form." He sputtered, sweat gathering at the crease of his neck. "She didn't own anything." Legal didn't flinch. "She built the vendor matrix architecture. She negotiated the exclusivity deals. She drafted the IP schema. And per this agreement, she retained all documentation and distribution rights not explicitly claimed by the company before departure, which you did not." The board chair leaned in. "So she owns the operating spine of Project Elevate?" Legal nodded once. "Yes. And since you never filed the IP transfer, she also holds rights to the internal tools being used to power your pilot clients." Cue implosion. The CFO dropped his pen. The Ops VP muttered, "Jesus Christ." One of the external advisors pulled out his phone and began typing furiously, probably messaging his assistant to start hunting for a parachute job. Raymond looked around the table like someone had moved the walls. This is insane. She was my daughter-in-law." The board chair's voice was cold enough to strip paint. "And that personal bias may be the exact reason we're here." Raymond opened his mouth again, but Legal cut in, sharper now. "You also failed to initiate revocation clauses on her data access, which means she still has access to our internal systems?" Someone barked from the far end of the table. Legal shook her head. "No, she revoked her own access and sent confirmation. She did your job for you." Silence again, and then, almost unnoticed, Cole stood up. Didn't speak, didn't make eye contact, just gathered his laptop, his half-used notepad, and quietly walked out the door. No one stopped him. Raymond watched him leave, jaw clenched, hands white-knuckled on the armrests. "What do you want us to do?" he asked the board chair, finally, voice a rasp. The chair didn't even look at him, he looked at Legal. "Do we have any options?" "Negotiate," Legal said, humbly, respectfully, and fast. Across town, I sat at my desk in the co-working suite, sipping cold brew and skimming an email thread from one of my newer clients, ironically, a startup obsessed with emotional intelligence in leadership. My assistant pinged me. "Emergency board MTG just wrapped. Insider says you dropped a bomb." I smiled faintly and opened a blank document. Titled it, Retainer Adjustment Board Rate. Because the next conversation wasn't going to be about feelings. It was going to be about value. The ballroom was filled with the clink of ice in whiskey glasses and the soft thrum of jazz that no one was really listening to. Investors in suits that cost more than my consulting retainer milled around small tables, exchanging forced laughter and desperate optimism. It was the kind of event where buzzwords got passed around like hors d'oeuvres: scalable, agile, synergy, meaningless sounds dressed in expensive cologne. Raymond stood just inside the entryway, scanning the room like he was still someone people wanted to talk to. He looked thinner, not physically, just deflated. The kind of man who'd once walked into rooms assuming gravity bent to him, now quietly realizing it had never worked that way at all. He spotted me before I spotted him. I was laughing, genuinely, shaking hands with a partner from Dovetail Technologies, a competitor his company once tried to poach from, back when they still had swagger and a full vendor pipeline. The partner gestured me toward the table, pulled out a chair with the kind of deference Raymond had always reserved for other men. I felt his eyes before I saw his face. He stood frozen, half a glass of scotch in one hand, that permanent twitch of disbelief etched between his eyebrows. Like he still couldn't quite process how the girl he never took seriously had quietly, methodically replaced him in rooms like this. Someone stepped up beside him. Board member, older guy, one of the few who hadn't tried to mansplain supply chains to me during Q2 earnings calls. He nodded toward me, then said quietly, "She salvaged what she could. We lost everything else." Raymond didn't answer, just watched. He had the face of a man watching his house burn down while the neighbor throws a garden party with his wife. Across the room, a contract folder slid across a table. It bore the name of a logistics firm I'd just brought over, one of his former clients. The new CTO signed first, then the partner, then me, Linda Farrow, strategic advisor. Simple, clean, black ink on a white page. That signature, my name, was the last one needed to finalize a 6-figure deal they'd tried and failed to close for a year. I didn't look over at Raymond. I didn't need to. There was no gloating, no final blow, only the stillness of closure. That rare, quiet moment when you realize the war is over. Not because you won, but because you stopped needing to fight. He'd built his company like a family heirloom, assuming he could hand it down, polish it up, and let legacy do the work. I built mine with contracts, leverage, and long memory. And now, the girl in the corner office with no nameplate had become the woman they introduced with handshakes and words like essential. I stood. The partner raised his glass. To clean exits, he said. To clean beginnings, I corrected. Raymond turned and walked out. I didn't follow. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.